So I have a question. Have you ever watched or read something that you just find overall appealing? Even when you put it into comparison with your other stuff that you may have read or watched, it may not hold up to those same standards of something that's extremely well written or has really profound concepts or ideologies or even really interesting characters, but overall you still find it really enjoyable and really appealing. This is how I feel towards Jujutsu Kaisen, and it's not to devalue the story, it's not to say that the story isn't well written or there isn't any enjoyable characters or deep and meaningful thought-provoking concepts, but the more I think about Jujutsu Kaisen and the experience that I had with it recently, the more I find the series just generally enjoyable. It's appealing to me in every single aspect, and it's nothing overly unique or special in any regard, but there's something there. And I can't say I've really had that experience with a lot of recent Weekly Shonen Jump series. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of phenomenal stuff out there like The Promised Neverland and Dr. Stone. Both series I have thoroughly enjoyed, but when it comes to Jujutsu Kaisen, I think of it a little bit differently. And I can't necessarily put my thumb on why I find it so appealing. Is it because of its nostalgic aura that it potentially gives off? Is it the simple yet deep nature that it holds? Is it its characters, its world, its concepts that are woven together pretty easily and effortlessly, but have a lot of substantial weight behind them? To help me answer this question, I thought I would go through the motion of kind of breaking the series up, talking about specific things, and just see the general reception for them. I think it would be appropriate to start somewhat in order, so starting with Yuji Itadori, the main character, is a really good place to kick things off. When I think of Yuji as a main character, I have this heavy nostalgic feeling towards Bleach and Ichigo as a main character. There's a lot of series nowadays that have these extremely flashy and over-the-top stories and worlds and abilities, and they're all great within their own realm. But when it comes to Jujutsu Kaisen and the characters that it inlays, it seems extremely grounded. Of course, there's magical abilities and curses and really crazy, powerful beings, yet everything seems relatable to a degree. And the more I thought about that, the more I thought about Yuji Itadori as a main character, the more I couldn't help feel like it was closely connected to Bleach. How Yuji and Ichigo kind of share a very similar opening sequence within their respected story. Both are generally pretty normal human beings with this little bit of tweak to them that makes them a little bit different, a little bit special. Both face the concept of death extremely early on, and both have an emotional drive that isn't superficial, that isn't necessarily artificial. What I mean by that is the difference of having a respected goal to more so a respected passion. I want to be the Hokage, I want to be the Pirate King, I want to be the number one hero. Definitely all respectable goals, and definitely all passion driven, but sometimes can become very superficial and artificial. And I think because in comparison, when you have characters like Ichigo and Yuji that have goals completely away from them, I want to protect the people that I love, I want to protect my friends. The goal isn't necessarily there. The incentive for people to continue this story isn't potentially as high compared to the prior that I mentioned, as the goal is a lot more artificial and methodically planned out for you to follow and to lead up to. However, having the goal of saving your friends and not wanting people to get hurt is a very benevolent thing in a lot of different ways. And for me, I feel like a lot of characters miss that. It's usually added on as some sort of side piece, and it's not to say that characters can't be written both poorly and extremely well in both aspects, but when it comes to Ichigo, that was one of the quote-unquote biggest problems that people had about him, that he never necessarily had a goal to achieve. He just wanted to protect his friends, and he was thrown into this world because of it. To me, I find that really appealing, and it resembles pretty much identically with Yuji's opening sequence and how he's thrown into this world and how he gains all of these abilities. Be it may the path that they take are extremely different, the concept for Yuji is a little bit closed off. It already has somewhat of an ending point at play, which actually works in its benefit. It favors it rather well. And I think this is a very subconscious appeal towards the main character. Death is an extremely weird concept. within stories. Sometimes it's non-existent, sometimes it's the most prominent thing. It's very hard to find that balance between the two, but when your main character is taken out of his normal world and thrown into a very power-hungry, depthly, curse-like world that death around every corner is an equal possibility, the fact that he puts himself in a position where he knows he will die potentially by the end of the story, yet still has this somewhat positive mindset about it that he still wants to continue forward, is extremely impactful. It is completely overshadowed, usually by the negative factor that these characters don't have a specific goal to drive towards. And I get it, it's each to their own, but for me, Yuji and Ichigo stand on their own 2 feet in that regard. They face the concept of death early on. They face the consequences for it and the sacrifices for it. And obviously we know that they're not going to die because it's the beginning of the story. Yet in Yuji's case, knowing the ending and the path that he is taking is a very destructive one, yet still wanting to take it, yet still having the same goal of not allowing more people to get hurt, it's very sacrificial in a way. It's a very benevolent thing. Continuing on this path, so Sukuna, the curse inside of him, doesn't escape and doesn't potentially hurt more people, he becomes a martyr at the beginning of the story. It's compelling, and I appreciate that. It does take a backseat extremely early on, however. Obviously, we're introducing more characters, we're introducing new concepts, and it's not something that is thrown in your face 24/7, which, on top of everything that I've talked about, that in itself is something that I also do appreciate. It's not forced down your throat that Yuji is a sacrificial character, and you knowing at the beginning of the story that by the end of it he most likely will die, even though it is a massive factor, it's not something you remember constantly. It comes up here and there, but it ultimately fizzles out with time, and it goes back to that normality, which balances everything out extremely well. I think a lot of characters within Jujutsu Kaisen's story and within its surrounding world are extremely grounded. Satoru Gojo, for example, his character being the pinnacle of Jujutsu Kaisen's abilities and how powerful a character can truly get, even though he's written in a way that makes his character seem undefeatable, and even though he has so much power behind him, for the first time, the showcase of that, the responsibilities that power holds, the reception from other people and how they view him has been impactfully shown. And I can't necessarily say a lot of series do that. They don't want to really show the inner dynamics of their most powerful character within the story and how people truly feel about him. It's something special that Jujutsu Kaisen does. And it doesn't do it till a little bit later on with the most recent stuff, as it is focusing more heavily on Satoru Gojo's kind of arc at the moment. But his backstory and how people, I wouldn't per se used him, but their reaction towards him and their own emotions were extremely conflicting, as they felt because he was so powerful, the more they themselves messed up on specific missions, they would become extremely disheartened and would see that everything that they're doing is pointless if they could send someone as powerful as Gojo out into the field to handle their work for them. It kind of brings this compassion towards individual characters, but more so into the story, that these people feel and interact with one another, even towards the most powerful character within the story so far. They feel some type of way about that, and there's nothing he can do about being the most powerful, but when it's disheartening to see yourself fail over and over again, of course those emotions would creep in where you would think that, why don't they just send the most powerful person out? Why don't they just send Satoru Gojo out? He can handle all of this. I like that. It's compelling. It makes characters feel alive and interact with each other as humans and powerful beings alike. It causes some very interesting conflicts and dynamics between specific characters, which I will not name, which lead to bigger events down the line. What wraps all of this up in a nice, neat bundle is not only the curses are the main kind of villainous element to the story, but how these curses are created. Negative emotion for curses is something that I absolutely love. And the fact that these negative emotions creating curses are specific to whatever that negative emotion is towards is amazing. There's so many opportunities, so many gruesome and heartbreaking and realistic opportunities that the author can go with in terms of creating some extremely prominent curses. Just to put that into perspective, perspective. Just imagine yourself being angry at something. It could be the most minimalistic thing, it could be goofy, it could be extremely detrimental, it could be dangerous. Imagine your negative emotion towards it. Now imagine that could create some sort of demon or curse resembling that emotion. There is a lot of curses already within this story that reflect some very prominent issues within society. Mahito, for example, is a curse birthed from human hatred. To me, that's extremely impactful. He's not just some curse created out of nothing, he's a curse created by human emotion towards hating other human. And yet even his abilities reflect what he was created by and how he manipulates and warps humans, how he treats them and transforms them. Every prominent curse, I should say, has this special dynamic for it, and it makes for this extremely interesting cast of curses that can easily appear in the future, but also the semantics or the details towards the negative emotion isn't necessarily all too bad. Fear plays a massive role in creating curses. This fear is kind of connected with negative emotion in some way, shape or form, and it's also a big selling point for curses as well. Fearing something to hating something creates this monster, and this monster can become extremely powerful. It can even attract other curses. If the negative emotion is so massive and pooled within a majority of people, it can attract and evolve these curses. I love this concept, and the amount that it can be played upon is honestly endless, and it makes me extremely excited to see where the author could actually take this, how morally messed up he could truly get, what type of extremely deathly curses he can create based on people's emotions. I think laying out my thoughts like this has made me realize that a good amount of characters within Jujutsu Kaisen are compelling, the curses within Jujutsu Kaisen are compelling, as well as the core nature of the negative emotion and how the curses are created is also compelling. Don't get me wrong, there is a lot of different things within this story surrounding the abilities as well that are extremely simple. I think the usage of the abilities and how it kind of entails to just being magic at the end of the day is extremely simplistic. It makes for a very interesting dynamic where you have this output of simple magic users compared to the back end and the core of where everything starts, why they have this ability to begin with, what it is thrived and built upon. It's used in pretty simple ways, but the more you kind of develop in those natures, the more complex it gets, like the territory abilities, for example, which I find extremely reminiscent of Hunter x Hunter. I think to me, Jujutsu Kaisen has this perfect balance of simplicity, but also complexity surrounding it. And regarding the complexity, it's so much more on the backside that the only way you really see it is if you read through the story and try and search for it yourself. It's never actually given to you. It doesn't necessarily hold your hand all too much. And I've always enjoyed stories like that. Something that doesn't give you everything on a silver platter. It wants you to think for yourself. It wants you to create theories and explore these characters even further and their abilities and their emotions. And that's something that I truly appreciate, and Jujutsu Kaisen does this extremely well, mixing that with its simplicity and how complex some abilities can get and the pretty engaging fights that it has and character interactions and dynamics. You have yourself an overall compelling story that is extremely appealing. I think what's great about a series appealing to someone is that it's always different. The appeal for Jujutsu Kaisen for me is going to be different for you. So I would love to hear what's appealing about Jujutsu Kaisen for you. What makes this series thrive for you? What makes you continue to read it? Because I'm sure a lot of you have some very interesting answers. So with that being said, that is basically it. Once again, let me know how you feel about Jujutsu Kaisen. What do you find appealing about it? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. But I'm actually going to end the video off here. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.